Hello, and welcome to my week 4 assignment 1, Courage, Humility, and Authenticity, submitted by Terrence L. Jennings for lead 736, instructor Dr. Mark Weatherly. The first questions that we tackle in this week's discussion will be, what is courage, and is courage necessary to be an effective leader? Why or why not? How does courage impact ethics or ethical decision making? This week's lessons or this week's resources were rich in materials that covered this particular subject. And in our text, How to Be a Positive Leader, the ethical act of a leader is to do what is right just because it is right. That is what Dutton and Spreitzer have in our text. And as it pertains to courage, sometimes it takes courage to do what is right, even when uh, other organizational leaders may not do the same thing, maybe in their minds to get the desired results. However, it takes courage to be an ethical leader at times, especially when the outcome may not be um, what you would want as a leader, as far as the success defined by others. But if you are to be an effective leader, then it will take that courage to do what is right just because it is right. In our resources, Detert writes, courage, after all, is about taking worthy actions despite the potential risk. If no one ever got fired, was socially isolated, or suffered other consequences for a particular action, we wouldn't consider it courageous. Reardon goes on to say, people who become good leaders have a greater than average willingness to make bold moves, but they strengthen their chances of success and avoid career suicide through careful deliberation and preparation. The next three questions ask, how does courage benefit the leader? How does it benefit the followers? And how does it benefit the organization? Kelly et al. Writes that the courageous leader is willful and intentional in their actions. They execute their actions after mindful deliberations. It involves risks, and they're primarily motivated to bring about a noble, good, or worthy end. And thirdly, despite the presence of the emotion of fear, they still act with courage. Kelly et al. Goes on to tell the story about the battle mind training system. This is when training for soldiers to face unpleasant and fear laden situations of combat and to act in spite of being aware of their dangers. This encourages a positive outlook and emphasizes the ability of all service members to act in a courageous manner in combat. And this, in turn, affects the entire organization. In this particular scenario, the individual courage affects the overall experience and safety of the organization. It is truly an example of life and death. Courageous behavior in organizations unfolds in response to duress. The next question asks, is there a downside of acting courageously? And the answer is yes, there are times when acting courageously may be perceived as inauthentic or self serving. Also, it is a fact that some people, some leaders who act with courage may not have the most pure intent. An example of courage in action that I'm going to reference is myself. About 15 years ago, I was serving as minister of music at a church with a women's choir that was dwindling. At the time that I got there, the services were great. The attendance for the worship service was above the denomination's average. However, the choir itself, the women's choir, was experiencing declining numbers. And my response, rather than continuing to allow the choir to not perform to the best of their ability, and for the members who were faithful to experience embarrassment and not being fulfilled by being a part of the organization, I took the courageous stance of having the choir disband for a period of 2 years, with the understanding that we would bring the choir back when there was greater buy-in, the organization as a whole, the church and the music ministry was stronger and could sustain adding another choir back to the groups. And so after about 2 years, I got a core group of leaders together, of women in the church from different facets. And at that time, we renamed the group. We rebranded the group, and that group that ended with 12 2 years prior came back with 100 plus members. And the picture that I'm sharing in this presentation was the first Sunday that this group sang. The reason I call this courageous is because originally I was told that that would be my job if I sat that choir down or disbanded the group. However, I continued with that move to go ahead and disband the group, rename it, rebrand it, establish new leadership, new directors, and we came back, like I said, with about 100 over 100 women in the choir, and to this day, that is still the strongest choir within the music aggregations at the church. Now we move into our next topic, humility. The question is, what is humility? In our Oxford Handbook, Owens writes, colloquialisms such as down to earth and having a ground view reflect humility's lexical origin. Thus, in general terms, humility means to have a grounded view of or perspective of oneself and others. Next, we are asked, is humility necessary to be an effective leader? Why or why not? I believe it is necessary to be an effective leader. Humility allows you to be more relatable to those you lead and shows that you do not see yourself better than or greater than those within the organization. In their study, Chatterjee and Handbrick found that humble CEOs were more likely to pursue incremental improvements and have less variable performance. The benefit to the followers, um, in Tagney's writing, it states a leader who exudes humility may be open to new ideas, contradictory information, and advice. Prime and Talib state that employees who perceived altruistic behavior from their managers also reported being more innovative, suggesting new product ideas and ways of doing better work. The Oxford Handbook of Positive Leadership states that there's not much published research about humility in teams or organizations. However, the unpublished research revealed a strong positive relationship between humility and team performance. In their article in the Oxford Handbook for Positive Leadership, Owens et al. Writes that humble people may be perceived as unassertive or lacking in initiative. They may also go unnoticed by their superiors. An humble individual who I've encountered while living here in Dallas, Texas, is Dr. Jerome E. McNeil Jr., the previous pastor of Christian Chapel CME Church in Dallas. Upon meeting him, he shook my hand, did not tell me his name initially, and just wanted to find out more about me and talk to me and ask where I'm from, and began to share that there were members of the church who were also from my hometown, and he was excited to meet me. And about a minute or so before he introduced me to the choir, he told me his name, and I did not realize he was the pastor until he began to talk to the choir and introduce them to me when I as a member of the team that was coming in view of a call that evening or that week. The church that he was pastoring when he got there was a church of 50 people. The church that I was interviewing in 2004 for the minister of music position was a church of 5,000 members. He was extremely humbled and never shared his position in the church, position in the denomination, and just how prolific he was as a pastor within the city, state, and country. That stuck with me as I continued to serve as the minister of music at the church. And when people would see either the congregation or the building, and they would see the stats and the fast growth of the church, I was reminded of how humble he was as the pastor and the humility with which he performed his job. And I emulated that. The entire staff emulated the humility and down to earth quality that Dr. McNeil possessed and exuded as the leader. You never heard him describe himself as the pastor, other than that was his title. But as far as his position and how he treated other people, he was just Jerome. And he treated everyone else the same as equals. And the respect that he showed his staff and membership has went a long way to not only grow the church, but grow the individuals within the church. The last concept that we studied this week is authenticity or authentic leadership. The questions are: what is authenticity or authentic leadership? And do you think authenticity or authentic leadership is necessary to be an effective leader? Why or why not? In our reading, Kernish writes that there are four unique components of authentic leadership. They are awareness, unbiased processing, action, and relational orientation. The second question: do you think authenticity or authentic leadership is necessary to be an effective leader? Why or why not? It is important and it is necessary to be an effective leader, in my opinion. This is because authenticity influences trust, and trust in leadership has been identified as a crucial element in the effectiveness of leaders. This is a quote by Avalio et al. In 2004. The last three questions in this domain are: how does authenticity benefit the leader? How does it benefit the followers? And how does it benefit the organization? It benefits the leaders in that it helps them make ethical decisions as well as influences their effectiveness. It benefits the followers in that it provides better job satisfaction, empowerment, task engagement, and can raise optimism. How does it benefit the organization? Avalo et al. States that it affects the culture of the organization. There is a downside to authentic leadership or authenticity. According to Avolio et al., some of the context that define the quote success of an authentic leader and the organization may need clarification, as these concepts are influenced heavily by perception. In our final question, we are asked to bring it all together. How does courage, humility, and authenticity work together and complement each other? As leaders, we must have courage, humility, and authenticity. You have to have the courage to do what you know is right, no matter what the consequences may be. You have to have the humility to know your strengths and weaknesses, and authenticity will allow you to seek those within the organization who may have skills that are stronger than your own and who may have ideas that will help propel the organization even further in the realm of success. They complement each other because if you are able to acknowledge what you are good at, what you are strong in, and you can also acknowledge that strength in other people, those skills in other people, your organization will thrive. An organ an example of this, coming together in my own experience this school year is my first year as an administrator. My experience has been that as a classroom teacher, we have so many opinions about what administration or administrators should do. This year, I'm on the other side of that. We have implemented new initiatives, and we have had to have the courage to implement sometimes unpopular initiatives, but we know will benefit students in the long run. We had to be able to be humble in that we had to ask staff members who have worked outside of our district best practices from the districts from which they came so that we would not run into some of the roadblocks and have some of the experiences that we are aware of, as far as the possibilities of negative impacts on programs and students. We authentically understood that we did not have all of the answers at the administration building. Therefore, we went to the campus level and we asked principals, counselors, and teachers their opinions and their suggestions so that when we implement the new initiative, it would not only be more successful for the students, but it would also be better received by the staff. Thank you so much for listening to this week's presentation. I look forward to further learning in this course.